Welcome to Supply and Space. I am your host, David Beck, the Director for Center for Industrial Innovation Systems at the Institute for Digital Assets and Innovation. Today, I'm very honored and proud as a U.S. Marine Corps veteran to have the Honorable, this is me saying honorable, Miss Carla Dembik with me today. Please introduce yourself and let's get right down to business.
All right. Thank you so much, David, for having me. I really appreciate it. Hello, everybody. I'm Carla Dembik. I am the founder and CEO of Aeon Space. We are a space technology company building the next critical infrastructure across the space ecosystem. So that's it in a nutshell. And David, let's get into it.
All right. So, Carla, you come from a world most space founders don't even know. Military intelligence, Army aviation, cybersecurity, fintech. When you look at the orbital economy and decide to build Aeon Space, what invisible threat did you see that the rest of the industry was looking past?
Yeah, that's a great question, because one of the things that we looked at is where the bad guys are hiding, right? And a lot of the time, the bad actors are hiding in that encrypted space throughout the entire ecosystem. So when we were looking at the space economy and how can we use the product that we already had that was commercially available over in Asia, how can we pivot this and really connect with what is happening in the space industry and protect it from all these things? And one of the biggest criteria that we looked at is how many recent cybersecurity attacks were happening in the past year post what happened with Viasat. And that really accelerated our R&D to go after the space economy and protecting everybody within that supply chain.
Yeah, I think that's a broader perspective that a lot of companies miss when it looks at the ecological system for space protection across the larger space economy. So Aeon Space taglines that you solve invisible threats. For someone who hasn't thought about this before, I know a little bit about it because my background. So think of it as like a cargo ship at sea. And I would say, from my perspective, a spaceship at sea, being funny here. But, the shipping lanes are visible, but the vulnerabilities in the navigation systems, the communications, the manifest, threat analysis, those are invisible. What are the invisible threats that keep you up at night when you think about the space supply chain?
Yeah, it's one of those things that we see from all the way from the terrestrial systems, right? That's where it begins, is everything is connected on Earth. And you have to go through these supply chains and the terminal ground stations in order to get to the satellites and the rest of the space ecosystem. So when we're looking at that, the things that really keep me up at night is what happens if a 0 day happens in the space economy, somewhere in the space ecosystem. That's what keeps me up, because right now there is nothing to protect it. And we think that encryption is security, and everything in space has to be encrypted, but it's just a security tool. And we're missing the bigger picture. And if one link in that supply chain goes down, everything could potentially go down. And that's what really keeps me up at night. And how do we protect that? So it's kind of the same mission that we had in the Marines, right? The same mission throughout the military. It's just, I have a suit on now, and it's still that protection. It is still protecting our critical assets, protecting that national security and the infrastructure and everybody who's building in this space. And that's what's important. And that's what I try to think about. How can I do this better? What are we missing? Let's look at it in a bigger picture, in a more holistic way, in going out and talking to people like yourself and talking to the people building the rockets, building the terminal ground stations. What can we do better to ensure that this doesn't happen?
Yeah, I think it's very important. The A to B standpoint, people tend to go to A to Z instead of A to B to C and build things slowly, methodically through the whole process of innovation in terms of core technology. We can't take that. We can't take that for granted, and we definitely can't have those mistakes in space, as we've seen a lot of that on Earth and how it's played to place into all security measures we do from technology here. So, from a commercial space economy standpoint, from your perspective, what are your thoughts on ways your company can innovate the arena where we see so many threat actors, so many bad actors, so many unknown opportunities that you could face that could actually help the space community be more resilient than what we do every day from a supply chain or just operating standpoint and footprint?
Yeah. It I see it as a unified security architecture, right? We have to build the trust into this security architecture because right now nobody owns space. We have commercial operators, we have government operators, we have operators from all over the world. So how do we build a security across a global system, terrestrially and non-terrestrially, that will unify everybody, that we can talk about verification, interoperability. Those are a lot of key points that are on the global stage right now, and build that trust architecture throughout the entire thing, throughout the entire ecosystem, where we can all work together, because it's going to take all of us working together in order to be successful in space and even beyond that. Right now, it's just satellites, right? And then we're starting the lunar base, and then Elon's going to take us to Mars. So it's this broader, deep space kind of technology that if we can get it to work here on Earth, which we can, we already have, then it's going to go beyond, and we're all going to be protected kind of the same and being able to work together as well.
Yeah, I appreciate that thorough analysis. From my perspective, I say this week after week, month after month, and every time I talk, we've talked several occasions and times, and we had to a conference we met a couple weeks ago. How important ecosystems are, right? You can talk about supply chain left, right, all day long. There's so many people talking about supply chain. It's getting to a point where it's a rhetoric discussions. But from that whole nuance of supply chain, the most important piece is the ecosystem in which you create. No one secures the space economy alone, right? There's no alone here. There's no Aeon Space and then there's nobody there. There's always someone coming at you or trying to beat you or be better than you are or combat your technology and take what you have from a trust standpoint. Who are the key partners you think from a government commercial defense that Aeon Space needs to work with to make the orbital supply chain truly resilient from your perspective? Where do you see the biggest collaboration gaps today?
I think the biggest collaboration will be with kind of Space Force from a government side, is working with Space Force to secure what their mission is and to secure everything as well. So from kind of a national security perspective, we'll say Space Force and NRO and the intelligence community. From a commercial perspective, because it kind of encompasses everything. This year alone, it's definitely SpaceX is a huge player, right? But this year alone, now we're going to have direct to device that is going to be online and connecting directly to the satellites. So now there's no security right now that I know of for D2D. And so commercially speaking, it's connecting with Viasat, it's connecting with AST, it's connecting with SpaceX, and then Amazon just bought up Globalstar to launch. I think they're closing in January 2027. So these major terrestrial players are now huge players in the space ecosystem, and we're looking at it from a dual use perspective, because that's exactly what is going to be required for a collaboration to make this secure. Because if one goes down, let's just say hypothetically, one node goes down in a direct to device, the entire mesh can go down. And now all of the stuff that we launched, and you know this because you understand cybersecurity as well, and you've done an amazing job with the engineering piece of it. And it could take down the entire direct-to-device network. And that's what we're trying to prevent. And it's not just us alone, like you said. It is going to take a collaboration across government, across civil, across commercial entities and the world in order to come together to make sure that the entire space ecosystem is secure. And it's ambitious, but it's not impossible.
Right, I agree. Listen, you talk and the enthusiasm that you and your company add to the posture of space makes me think about a definition for cybersecurity. Cybersecurity is not your cybersecurity. It is the threat analysis of a cyber attack and a non-securital piece that we play in ecosystem for space to me. From that perspective, the Senate Commerce Committee just announced that the Satellite Cybersecurity Act in April 2026, I've passed this along to a couple people about how important this bipartisan bill is to establish voluntary cybersecurity guidelines for commercial space operators. As someone building in this space, someone to me is very important in that space because you wore the honor and badge as a military officer, but also see it as a space economic person and founder. What does this signal to you? And what does the policy environment need to get right? I mean, really get it right to actually protect LEO economy?
Yeah, and that's a great question, David, because a lot of it is always about cybersecurity. And what we see from policy is, what we see from policy and what actually happens operationally are two different things. So the biggest thing is that we can have policies that say this, but with policy without the capital and the structure to build what it is that needs protecting to follow the policy, there's that huge gap between this is what we really need for the economy. But okay, how are we going to operationalize it? Where's the capital to do that? Who's the companies that are going to be able to do it? And a lot of the times what I see happening is they go to these big primes. But and there's nothing wrong with that, but it's not focused, right? It's a big, huge entity, and they're not specifically security. So we take from the biggest and the brightest and the creative ones coming up, and we partner with what really needs to be done, right, with this policy. And we say, okay, this is how we can solve it, right? Because it's a challenge. Here's the policy. This is what you need. This is what you need to implement. Well, how are you going to solve it now? And that's a conversation that needs to happen.
It is definitely a conversation I think is going to be more drawn out than ever based on things that are happening day to day that haven't occurred, that we haven't even talked about today on this podcast, that definitely affects this area as we go through the process. So let's look at longevity, right? We want you to grow. We want your company to be a stable piece of this architecture and helping protect our systems when we launch them into orbit. Looking out 5 to 10 years, what does your world look like for Aeon Space? And has it succeeded to the point? What does it feel like to operate in space economy where the invisible threats are actually being addressed?
Wow, that is such an exciting question because I've thought about this numerous times, right? Where we are in 5-10 years from now. And where we want to be is the standard for security across the entire space ecosystem. And what does that look like? That means securing everything here on Earth and also securing it in orbit and going beyond that. So right now, right, a lot of the things that we are doing are already cutting edge and they're frontier security. We built a very, and I'll go a little into detail right now, but we built a very secure and interesting zero trust architecture that we include with the non-decrypt encrypted threat detection, right? But we're pushing beyond that. We're looking at FPGA chips. We're looking at post-quantum security. We're already building the next set of technology that we think is going to be able to be necessary in the entire space economy to secure it properly, because we don't know what's next. And the great thing about what we have right now is that it evolves, it learns. So if it was already trained on over 10 billion threat models already here on Earth. But in space, there's very different things and very different actors that we have to address. So the great thing is, what we do without going into the nitty gritty of it is it changes, it morphs, it has this behavioral profiling that adapts and assesses and then seeks out something that isn't normal. And that way it is constantly almost teaching and self-healing systems. And that's where it's going is, the quantum, the FPGA chips, and something that can autonomously self-heal, self-delegate, and self-learn to threats that maybe it hasn't faced before. And that's what's exciting. And that's what we hope to set the standard with.
I think you are advanced in your thinking on this effort. As we see companies like VAST just announced the other day, they're building commercial dual-use satellite systems to pivot from just building a conventional orbital space station. There is a more need today and tomorrow than there was yesterday for what you bring to the table. And I think the future is bright because people are starting to take and pay attention. As you know, fighting a battle for this for you for many years and getting that 10 billion data points, getting people to recognize how important this really is to security. I don't think people really, I hope they're paying attention to this podcast and they watch it 10, 15 times. Cybersecurity is the number one threat you will ever have for your business. Doesn't matter, are you a mom and pop business or you're a Fortune 100 company, cyber threats are ongoing, heavily inducive, and they don't take time off from your systems architect because you're asleep and you have a business that works from 8 to 5. So please listen to when we say this in this podcast, how important this is as a space company, and get companies like Aeon Space there to solidify and protect you before it gets to a point where you cannot turn back. The inspiration today is very much needed, I think, in inspiring people to go and build their own companies. Space needs everyone: engineers, scientists, lawyers, marketers, teachers, Marines. What's your message to the young people and career changers watching this podcast right now?
Oh man, I think the biggest thing that I could tell to young people and those entering the career field is think like there is no box. Don't let anybody kind of stick you in a silo and force you to follow all these guidelines, on your own time, in your own thinking and your own innovation. Think about what's next. What can I do to help? Right? And think like there is no box, because so many times we get stuck in this parameter of I have to fit inside here, or my innovation or my creativity has to fit inside here. And then we lose something that could be so magnificent and contribute to not only the space economy, but to all of humankind. And so the biggest thing is think like there is no box. And you got a crazy idea, go for it. Because you know what? Somewhere along the line, that is going to be needed. And I wish somebody told me that when I was 17 years old. And it would have changed my outlook on life of saying, you know what? I have some wild ideas and visionaries and I can think of where things are going to go. And what that could have done for me would have been just unbelievable. But my biggest advice, and I tell my son this, right? He's 11 years old, and I tell my son this all the time. Think like there is no box, and don't let anybody try to put you in a box. Think of all these creative and solution ideas when it comes to engineering, when it comes to building, designing. Where can we go from here? Well, we're going to the moon. How was that on anybody's radar 10 years ago?
Nope, it wasn't.
Nope. And now we're going to Mars, and that's always kind of been a thing. But what else can we do? What else can we think of to create when there are no limitations? And that's where all the innovation is going to happen.
Yeah, I think the true education is dreaming, developing, innovating, going outside the box, creating something. Doesn't matter if someone done it, but you can do it better.
Yeah.
And just keep being a part of the ecosystem, right? I mean, if you fail, so what? Start again. Build, make it better. Think about the reasons why you failed to be the significance for you to succeed. The future is in space, and we need all of the kids. You're 18-year-old, my sons, my daughter, we need everybody a part of this because they're the future. And when we're done doing the work we're doing today and all the enthusiasm we show, we talk about this world of space that we hold so dear to our hearts. we're going to need them to take the lanyard and go forward. So, warm thank you from the bottom of my heart. Also want to throw out there for winning the Shark Tank as well and being one of the significant companies to look at for 2026 in my perspective. For those in the audience who want to reach out and support you, go through the journey with you, invest in you, how can they find you?
You guys can find me on LinkedIn under Carla Dembik or Aeon Space. And of course, through this podcast and our website, aeonspace.us.
That's right, everybody. HTTPS, aeonspace.us. And so I hate to get to this part of the podcast because I want to talk about space all day. But I want to say, again, thank you for joining us today for Supplying Space podcast. For those who follow Supplying Space, please like, subscribe, and follow. And on behalf of me and my Marine Corps guests and amazing CEO Aeon Space, Carla, we want to wish you a happy day and simplify, Semper Supra.
Thank you, David. Semper Fi.